Good evening. My name is Steve Kaufman. I serve as an engine company captain with the Ventura County Fire Department, and right now I serve as the Public Information Officer for CAL FIRE Incident Management Team 4. We are coming to you live from the Silver Dollar Fairgrounds here in Chico for the North Complex West Zone operational briefing virtual community meeting on this 15th day of September 2020, 6:01 p.m. First of all, I want to remind you that we are currently streaming live on the CAL FIRE Butte County Facebook page and on the Butte County Sheriff Facebook page. And I was told this evening is going to be the first night that we actually have captions with our live streaming, so that will be on there as well. And then please look after the press conference, and then if you go back and rewatch the press conference, before the press conference there are a number of slides there that point out all the locations throughout the communities that we have what we call information boards. And those are boards that have a map on them, and then they also have our most current information update sheets. First thing I want to just go over, we've talked the last few days in detail about our damage inspection teams. I just want to pull up the slide that has the tiny URL, and I will go over that with you. If you are interested in finding out about the damaged or destroyed structures, you can go to tinyurl.com/y3jmzxnj. And then I just want to remind you, when you go to that website, it's updated a few times daily, 2 or 3 times daily. And what the crews do is, as they're going through, they inspect the structures. Remember, we talked about it the last few days. They inspect damaged, destroyed, and non-damaged structures. And then after they do a number of inspections, they will upload those 2 or 3 times throughout the day. Let's go over our current numbers. Damaged residential structures, 29. Destroyed residential structures, 489. Damaged commercial structures, 5. Destroyed commercial structures, 46. Damaged other structures, 24. Destroyed other structures, 247, which brings our grand total to damaged structures at 58, and our grand total at destroyed structures, 782. Now with the current numbers around the state of California. Currently there are over 16,600 firefighters assigned to fires all throughout the state of California. They're working on more than 2,200 fire engines, over 319 fire crews, over 335 dozers, and over 374 water tenders. They're assigned to 25 major fires or complexes throughout the state of California, and 33 new fires have started since yesterday. For a grand total, our acreage is 2.8 million acres. Now to the North Complex West Zone acreage. 77,329 acres, 29% contained. And the total acreage for the North Complex in its entirety, 273,335 acres, 34% contained. Now I'd like to bring up our Operations Section Chief.
Good evening. Ron Bravo, Deputy Operations, Incident Management Team 4. So before we get rolling, I want to go over a couple of areas that have come up specifically as it relates to communities that were within our West Zone. We'll actually start in Brush Creek, which is just over into the other zone. However, it's in our area of operation. Brush Creek, Berry Creek, and Feather Falls have all sustained substantial damage to not only infrastructure, but also homes and additional other types of structures. There's even a couple of commercial structures in here, as many outbuildings have been consumed by the fire. What that means is having access into these locations are going to take time, and it's going to be difficult to get in there based on all the damage to the infrastructure, the buildings, as well as all the trees that have fallen from the fire. So all those communities that I mentioned have been affected dramatically, as well as the roads and the other access points to get in there. There's been a lot of damage. So how is our fire looking today? In our zone, things are looking pretty good on our northwestern or west side of the fire. So starting up in the Big Bend area, a lot of effort over the last couple of days has went into securing the lines in and around Big Bend. The lines have held. We're working diligently to get depth on our mop-up. So a lot of hard work has been done in there, and it's continuing to hold. We're still a couple days out of securing it completely, but the lines are tied in, and folks are in there working hard. For those that have been up in that country, it is very, very steep with sheer drop-offs. So a lot of hard work, a lot of efforts being taken there. Good work by our folks there. Coming around to the south end of Big Bend, that is tied in, looking well. As again, a lot of hard work still ahead of us, but the line is holding. We have secondary lines and contingency lines put in place on Big Bend so that we're in a place, if the weather changes dramatically, we're in a position to pick it up. Secondary lines or alternative lines, as well as contingencies, have been pushed up to Highway 70 in the Jarbo Gap area. We've moved beyond Jarbo Gap up to the ridge system using the old Ponderosa Way all the way up to Flea Valley, Dixie Road, and working our way up to Rock Creek Road. There's alternative lines in there as well as contingency. So we have our primary lines, our first choice, our secondary lines, our alternative lines, as well as our third choice, our contingency. So a lot of hard work's been done in there. We've also been able to assist our partners to the north, and they're continuing to scout and put in direct line as we head in the direction south toward Big Bend. The fire, I want to reiterate, has not had a lot of activity in this zone. To our far north, there have a lot of activity up by Bucks Lake, but not represented on this map is all the hard work they've done putting control lines up and around the corner of this, coming down the shoulder in our direction. Still work to be done up here, but they're putting in a good effort and the fire is not moving. We're very confident that we're going to be able to have our lines in place and not have to worry about Paradise or Concow anywhere within the next 7 days. So working our way back down through our area along the lake, headed towards the Bidwell Bar Bridge. Bloomer Mountain has been a challenge over the last couple days, but again, Bloomer Ravine was heated up a little bit today, but all of our lines that are in place are holding. Going to be a couple more days of hard work to get the depth we need on mop-up, but it's holding and looking really well. So a lot of hard effort's been put in there, so things are looking good across from that location in the Cherokee area. So Cherokee, there's a little bit more work left to be done to stitch together our contingency and alternate lines, but that is looking really good. Working our way around to Stringtown. We've told you in the past this area was mopped up and looking really well. Folks have been able to get back into this location, but there wasn't a lot of damage on this end of the fire. Working our way from Stringtown up into the Ponderosa Reservoir, our lines are holding directly along the fire's edge, as well as the work that's been done up around Forbes-town to Clipper Mills. We have a lot of contingency effort going on here and alternative lines that have been put in. We've done preparation on LaPorte Road, but that is not a primary line and it's not a secondary, it's a contingency. So it's like a third leg that we're looking at, but we're making those improvements. So up to our challenges. Today has been a challenging day, as was yesterday, because of the very, very rugged terrain at on Lost Creek drainage. We're at the confluence of the South Fork of the Feather River. It is very, very rugged in there, and we've had a lot of challenges in there yesterday, and today's no different. Very, very short window to utilize aircraft. We are only able to use maybe an hour's worth of work of both fixed wing, which is retardant dropping airplanes, as well as helicopters. We only had a little bit of opportunity to work in there to try to reinforce some of the direct lines. With that being said, we had it come across our line in a couple of spots and challenge a alternative line. So our folks are in there working hard tonight and trying to piece it together. but we are by no means out of the woods when it comes to what this fire can do in and around Clipper Mills and Forbes-town. So we've got a lot of issues out ahead of us for the next couple of days, but given the weather, hopefully we can get some clear skies and be able to utilize some aircraft. But with that, remember, our aircraft can only take off if it's safe to do so and safe to land. And given how much smoke is in our atmosphere all across the West Coast, it is very, very challenging to have that window of opportunity. We've done everything we can to move aircraft in different locations so we can able to utilize them to the best ability, but it's going to be a challenge. So be prepared that this will continue to be work ahead of us. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Dan Borsum, the incident meteorologist assigned to assist with the firefighting effort. Today was very similar to yesterday, where we did see a southwest flow aloft push a considerable amount of smoke away from the region. This allowed the temperatures to get a little bit warmer and the humidities to fall just a little bit more than yesterday, but nothing really significant. The winds, they mainly followed the diurnal pattern, where in the nighttime hours into the early morning, they're downslope, down valley, down canyon. And in the afternoon, when heating occurs, they begin to go upslope and up valley. We did launch another weather balloon from the Incident Command Post here in Chico. And like yesterday, it found a little belt of wind 4,000 feet above the ground, but those winds were prevented from getting to the surface by a warm layer of air over our heads. Now, these winds aren't seen at the surface, but it is useful information because it helps us understand where the smoke may be going, which can also indicate activity in the fire. Looking ahead, we expect Wednesday to be very similar to today. We don't have much change in the weather, so we expect it to again see the smoke clear, the temperatures get warmer, humidity get just a little bit lower, and the winds again will just follow that up valley, upslope pattern during the afternoon hours, with some stronger winds aloft again moving the smoke away. There is, though, a change in the weather pattern as we look ahead to Thursday. A cold front is expected to move across the region. This is a west to east moving cold front, meaning that it's likely to keep the wind directions very similar to what we've been seeing for the previous days. The weather event on September 8th was a north to south traveling cold front, and it produced different effects. Again, the front on Thursday will be moving from west to east. One good thing about this front is it is going to usher in some cooler air and some higher humidity, and those effects will really be noticeable on Friday when we see kind of a cool and quiet day. Unfortunately, this front isn't able to bring precipitation to this region. There are a few parts of extreme northwest California that may see some relief, and they've had fire activity as well. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jonathan Pangburn. I'm a unit forester for CAL FIRE San Benito Monterey unit, and I serve as fire behavior analyst for Incident Management Team 4. Overall, as you heard from operations, fire activity was reduced significantly on most of the west zone, specifically in the areas of Big Bend and moving down into Bloomer Hill and to Stringtown. Minimal activity was seen. There's still potential out there. There is a good crop of grass and fine fuels that are susceptible to carrying fire. So we're definitely not out of the woods in those areas, but we are not expecting any growth in those areas. Moving past Forbes-town and up into the Clipper Mills and Strawberry Valley area, we definitely saw some growth, as you heard, in the Lost Creek Reservoir area. This area, for those who don't know, is forested. It has a lot of tall trees, and it also has some areas with new growth, young pine trees that are, anywhere from, say, 3 to 10 feet tall. Those are very susceptible to fire, to ignition, as well as spotting potential. And we have been seeing a significant spotting potential with the warm, dry air over the past few days. So what does it mean to have spotting? That's when an ember or burning debris falls into an area that is a receptive fuel bed, and it ignites and then carries fire. And so that, in addition to the fire front, are the two problems that we're facing specifically in that area. For those of you who don't know what it burns like in a young forested stand that is about 10 feet tall, it burns basically like a brush stand. And so it has rates of spread and spotting that is more similar to that. So those are the challenges that firefighters are facing. And that is why they're working so hard on their containment lines to make sure that we have both or the primary, secondary, and or alternate and contingency lines in place. As you heard, there will be a change in the weather pattern, but it is in our favor mostly. There will be a slight increase in wind, but the lower temperatures and higher humidities will definitely help the firefighting efforts from Thursday over the next few days. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Corey Honey, and I'm the Sheriff and Coroner of Butte County. And I'm here once again this evening to give you an update on the Butte County Sheriff's Office's response to the North Complex West Zone Fire, which is also known as the Bear Fire. So this morning, the Butte County Sheriff's Office reduced evacuation orders to an evacuation warning for Highway 162 from Forbstown Road North to Bidwell Bar Bridge to include the areas on both sides of the roadway, all areas of Stringtown Road north of Mountain Oak Road, and Lumpkin Road from Fay Mar Drive to the Enterprise Bridge. Additionally, about an hour ago, the Butte County Sheriff's Office reduced the evacuation order to an evacuation warning for all of Cherokee Road from Thompson Flat Road north to Highway 70 to include the area east of Cherokee Road to the lake and the evacuated area west of Cherokee Road. Residents who are now in an area that is under warning are allowed to return to their homes, of course, but please be vigilant and be ready to evacuate if circumstances change and we have to issue an order to evacuate. Our dispatch center has been receiving a high volume of calls from citizens who don't have internet access and therefore cannot access our maps that show the area that remain under evacuation orders and evacuation warnings. You'll remember from my briefings over the course of the last couple of days, I have told you about how you can access that information off our website. Well, in addition to taking these calls from people who can't access it because they don't have access to the internet, our dispatchers are taking 911 calls, regular sheriff's office business calls, and they're talking on the radio to our deputies in the field. So you might imagine that they're quite impacted and unfortunately don't have a lot of time to spend with people helping them navigate the website. So in order to try to mitigate that, beginning tomorrow at 1 p.m., and I'll state that again, beginning tomorrow at 1 p.m., we're opening a call center for people who don't have internet access to call, and they can ask questions about what's on the maps and ask questions about whether or not their particular residence is in an evacuation warning, under evacuation warning or evacuation order. This call center is going to be manned or staffed by members of our Community Emergency Response Team, otherwise known as CERT, which you remember it's a program we put together in the aftermath of the Camp Fire. They'll be answering the calls, providing the assistance, and because they're not a dispatch center, not having to handle 911 calls, not having to handle radio traffic, our hope is that they'll have more time to spend with individual callers and provide them with answers. Again, that starts tomorrow at 1 p.m. After that, in the subsequent days, the hours of operation will be from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. every day for as long as it's needed. Now, I'm going to tell you this number right now, but if you call it tonight, no one's going to answer. Remember, this doesn't start till 1 p.m. tomorrow. But the number to call, starting at 1 p.m. tomorrow, for those people who need someone to go through the website with them is this. Area code 530-552-3010. Again, 530-552-3010. Please bear in mind that the people who are going to be answering these calls are volunteers, members of our community who've given up their time to help people who are in this difficult situation. And I would ask that you be patient with them. If there is a question that you have that they can't answer, we understand that's frustrating, but please don't take your frustration out on them. And on that note, I'd also ask you to be considerate of how you're speaking to our 911 and public safety dispatchers. Again, I know there's a high level of frustration. Quite frankly, we're all frustrated. But our dispatchers, as well as our deputies, are members of this community. They are impacted by this fire as well. Some of them have been displaced from their homes. And when I go in there and I hear about them being called some vile, vile names by people who are angry and frustrated, it is really disheartening. The fact is, folks, that's not going to do any good, and I'd ask that you keep that in mind and please try to treat them with some respect when you're talking with them as well. As I've talked about in the past a couple of nights, we're also working to put together an escort program whereby people with urgent needs will be escorted into their property for a limited duration of time. Our hope is to be able to have that up and running by early next week. That takes not only our ability to field those requests, but also have a sufficient number of law enforcement officers capable of conducting the escorts. In addition to that, we're still working on getting an aerial map of the impacted area together so that people can look at what's going on in the area and make a determination as to the status of their property. I would ask that when we get that up and running, that you really be cognizant of what your request is and make sure it's a urgent need. We've had people, unfortunately, tell us that they wanted to go up there to check for animals or feed animals, when in turn what they really want to do was water their illegal marijuana grows, and that's not something that we're willing to accommodate. All right, I've talked to you about our enforcement efforts in those areas where the orders to evacuate are in place. I'm going to tell you about some additional arrests that were made over the night. I tell you this to, one, reassure the people who are displaced from that area that we are, in fact, doing everything we can to keep the place safe and secure and keep your residences secure. But I also am telling you this in hopes that if you're of a mind to go up there and conduct some kind of illegal activity, that be aware that our law enforcement officers are going to do their best to keep you from doing that. So since last night, there have been 8 additional arrests of people who were in evacuation order. One arrest involved 6 people. Those people were Kristen Alea, age 32 of Lincoln, Bert Floyd, age 50 of Lincoln, Guadalupe Garcia, age 42 of Lincoln, Guadalupe Garcia Jr., age 22 of Lincoln, William Peterson, age 61 of Berry Creek, and Anthony Gannett, age 61 of Berry Creek. We were alerted to their presence by a homeowner who is evacuated from the area, who was monitoring surveillance cameras of his property from an off-site location and saw individuals trespassing on his property. When deputies and law enforcement officers arrived, they encountered those 6 individuals and learned that they had snuck into the area in an attempt to tend another illegal marijuana garden. They were placed under arrest because they were in an area that they shouldn't have been and trespassing on someone else's property. In addition to that, last night, a Christina Lafayette, age 33 of Forbstown, was arrested for being in the evacuation order. Deputies located her out and about. When they contacted her, they discovered that she was in possession of drug paraphernalia and ammunition, and she's not allowed to have either of those things, so she was arrested. Finally, yesterday, deputies made contact with a subject named Robert Tranmonte, age 42 of Forbstown. He was riding his bicycle around in an evacuated area. When he was contacted, he had a warrant for his arrest, and so the deputies were kind enough to give him a ride to jail so he could take care of that warrant. Now I'd like to turn to our efforts to deal with the reports of people who are unaccounted for or who their loved ones haven't been able to make contact with them. To date, the Sheriff's Office has dealt with 185 calls for service. 168 of those cases have been successfully resolved, and the people have been found to be safe and alive. We are still working to resolve 2 cases, and we have some positive leads. Fortunately, also tonight, I can report that no additional human remains were located since yesterday. And so the number of human remains that have been recovered since the beginning of this fire remains at 15. So that's no additional human remains, and the number remains at 15. I can also report that we have been able to make positive identifications and notify the next of kin in 3 cases. The first began on September 12th. Deputies and detectives responded to a property on Island Bar Hill Road in Feather Falls regarding a vehicle that possibly had the remains of a human being inside of it. Ultimately, the remains were recovered, and that subject has now been identified as Jacob Albright, age 74, of Feather Falls. I want to express my condolences to Mr. Albright's family. Next, on September 10th, 2 deceased individuals were located in the roadway on Handkirk Lane in Berry Creek. One was in the roadway approximately 10 feet away from an ATV. The other one was in the roadway near another vehicle. Ultimately, we have been able to identify one of those individuals as Paul Weiner, age 68, of Berry Creek. The other individual, we're still working to positively identify him and make the appropriate notifications to his next of kin. Finally, for tonight, on September 10th, Butte County Sheriff's deputies located the remains of a human being inside of another vehicle located on Lumpkin Road near Cedar Tree Lane in Feather Falls. Through DNA, we were able to positively identify that person as Randy Harrell, age 67, of Feather Falls. Again, my condolences to all of the families of the people who I've identified tonight. And that concludes my briefing, so thank you.
Good evening. My name is Darrell Laws. I'm an assistant chief for CAL FIRE in the Siskiyou unit, and I serve as one of the incident commanders for CAL FIRE IMT4. Just want to start off by thanking all of our cooperators, our partners, and especially those community members out there that have been affected. I'll start off with today is the smoke cleared, the weather cleared up, and we were able to fly some air resources on the fire. And that allowed our ground resources to have some support so they could keep pace with the fire. Also, as you heard from Sheriff Honey, he talked about repopulation continues. As we continue to get more containment on the fire, the threat decreases, and we're able to get folks back into their homes, their property. And we promised that that was our #1 priority, is to get you home as soon as it was possible and safe. So I want to start off yesterday in the Big Bend area. We had a life-threatening line emergency. We had a firefighter that had a anaphylactic reaction and difficulty breathing. The firefighter was in very steep portion of the fire and far away from any road. Early on, our line leadership out on the fire, they recognized the risk and it had planned ahead in case of just such an emergency. Rescue teams and firefighters on the line and made a lengthy technical rescue to get that firefighter to a location where the firefighter could be hoisted by a helicopter, meaning that he could be picked from the ground, brought into the copter, and then flown to seek medical attention. Copter 902 was able to get to the firefighter, hoist the firefighter into the ship, and then fly to meet medical staff. So thanks to their planning and efforts, that firefighter is alive and recovering today. So daily, we continue to proactively plan our fire attack. meaning that we base all of our plans on the predicted weather, predicted fire behavior, and what the ground looks like out there. And those firefighters are out right now. They're in steep, rugged terrain, rocky, out in the portions of the campfire scar where there's fuel that was burned but remained, and trees want to come down, rocks want to come down. So they're working in some pretty tough sections. But what that plan allows us to do is that allows us to prioritize sections of the fire. Every single day and further out days ahead is that we prioritize those sections. And we focus our resources into those sections. And what that does is that allows us to basically take a bite out of this fire and put more containment and allow us to reduce that risk to the folks out there. So I'll finish with our firefighters remain vigilant, and they're dedicated to containing this fire. And I thank you for your continued support, and have a good evening.
Okay. Again, we were watching the comments. We are still watching the comments. But I want to reach out there and thank our viewers who have been answering questions organically as the conference has been going on. We are still writing the questions down, but there are a lot of questions that are being answered by your friends and neighbors. So I encourage you, if you didn't hear something that you were looking for during this press conference, I encourage you to go back and review it one more time. There's always one or two little things you might pick out that you didn't hear or weren't prepared to grab. And then we will do the same thing that we did before. We'll start today with our weather, and we're going to read the questions that we've been getting online. We'll go through each function, and then I'll come back and talk to you at the end.
Dan Borsum, incident meteorologist. The question is, will the weather system coming in Thursday and Friday bring lightning? The quick answer is no. The explanation behind it is that we have not been seeing the record heat ahead of this system like we saw during the August 18th, 19th lightning outbreaks. So without that amount of heat in place beforehand, the movement of this system is really tracking towards the state of Oregon and Washington. So it's more of a glancing blow for this part of the world. So it is not expected to contain any lightning for California. Thank you.
Good evening, Jonathan Pangburn, Fire Behavior Analyst. The question is, to what extent, if any, does a widespread fire like this protect the area from major fires in the future? And if any, how long would the risk reduction be expected to persist? That is a very complicated question, and without going into too much detail, it depends on a lot of factors. It depends on the severity of the burn, in other words, how much vegetation was consumed. It depends on future factors such as rainfall and timing of the rain events to predict, or not to predict, but to substantiate the future vegetation that grows in the area. And it depends on future weather events and scenarios as well that are well beyond my ability to predict off the cuff. So what I can say is that we have been able to utilize many of the previous fire scars on this fire with reduced fire behavior. We have seen that in some areas, in a grassy area, the reduction in future fire threat is pretty much nothing because it's just going to grow back again the next year. In brush areas, it's going to give you a couple of years of reduced fire behavior because you don't have the dead component in the brush stand like it used to have, and it takes quite a few years, sometimes 5, 10 or more years to get that same level of fire behavior. And in a timber stand, there's a There's an increased risk as you have the small trees, but once they grow up and you have the lower branches pruned so that you can't get up into the crown fire, it generally reduces again there. So again, very complicated answer, and I hope I did it justice. Thank you.
Good evening again, Ron Bravo, Deputy Operations with Team 4. I got a couple of questions as it relates to Clipper Mills, Strawberry Valley, and one of the key components up there that a lot of families in and around our state send our kids up to is Woodleaf. So that area which I discussed before is above, basically north of Forbestown, and the areas that we're having difficulties down in the boy, I'm forgetting here for a second, sorry about that, but the South Fork of the Feather River. There's a lot of country in there that is very, very challenging, and unfortunately the drainages all kind of shoot up towards those ridge lines and those communities on LaPorte Road. So we are not out of the woods by any means, but we have people in there actively trying to get containment on the areas that are challenging us. They wanted to note as well what the rate of growth here. Well, we had a couple of areas where today, this afternoon, it went for about 14 acres of a run up a slope, but we've got line on top of that, and we're trying to pin it back in to the Feather River. So it's going to be a few more days. It's going to be challenging, especially with the terrain. Now, fire responds to topography very rapidly at times, and this has those components built in. When we say steep, rugged terrain, it's hard to put it into perspective, but the percent slope is when we're using the hose and our hands and our knees to crawl up and down it to get up it. It means it's really steep. That is steep and challenging throughout this drainage. The other thing that came up again today was specific addresses about where homes are at. We encourage you to go to the site that shows where our DINS teams have been working. But one question that came up is Foreman Creek. Foreman Creek's at the lower end of Berry Creek. You can see by the nature of the fire line that it consumed a lot of country in here. So if you have a specific address, please go in and look at what our DINS teams are doing, and you'll be able to see where they're working. But please understand, they still have a lot of country left to cover in a lot of areas. There is extensive damage to, like I said earlier, homes and infrastructure. So it's going to take some time for folks to get in there. Please utilize what the DINS teams are doing in the future map that the Sheriff's Office will provide. And lastly, people want to know about our maps. So there's a lot of moving parts on the map. And what we've tried to do so you can actually see the communities that were being affected is we don't also include all the symbology that our partners up here on the east side are utilizing. Part of that reason is it's very challenging to understand. And with any job, you always have a division of labor. So what we have to do is we have to break up our work assignments so that it's clear that people have a clear understanding of who they're working for and what their assignment is for the day. So when we come in, we try to break up a fire. First, it goes into branches, and then underneath branches there are divisions. So when this fire took off, it was one incident, managed by one incident management team. However, because of the complex nature and its size, we decided to zone the fire so that we had people in charge of one zone, i.e. the north zone, and then us on the west zone. The symbols you see here across the map, that represents a zone break. The letters that identify a specific area to work in underneath a branch are given a letter. We start our branches with numbers, as you can see here, branch 25. Under branch 25 is division Tango. Tango works for branch 25. So what happens, people have the ability to know exactly who they work for in a specific geographical location. These symbols here are identifying the difference between a branch. We have branch 25 and we have branch 23 here. The parentheses are breaks between divisions. As you can see, we have division T, R, and M. The separation between those two locations are the parentheses. So when you go to work on an engine and you go out and you're working for a division, you know where you're working, who you're working for, and who your boss is working for. So it's a division of labor that makes sense to be able to put a plan together to tackle this large-scale incident. Want to reiterate what these are. These are not decision points. These are called drop points. This is where we put supplies for our firefighters or meeting points for them to meet to go out on a work assignment. And that's it for tonight.
All right, I have a couple more questions that I don't necessarily have the answer to, but I'm going to tell you, I'm going to find out the answer either from the county or from the United States Postal Service. But there was a question, where can people in Berry Creek go to pick up their mail? So there is not a representative at our press conference right now from the United States Postal Service. I will look into that. I'm going to talk to the county, and we will get back to you tomorrow night. And then the last question is, if it's safe for the press to enter, why can't residents enter? And it's a complicated answer, but I'll try to explain it in real simple terms. There's a California penal code called 409.5. Under that penal code, the media has the right to go into an area that's evacuated, and there are 3 provisions. They can't go on private property without permission, they can't go into a crime scene, and they can't get in our way. And so as long as they're abiding by those 3 provisions, they can go in there under the California Penal Code 409.5. And then I just want to remind everybody about that tiny URL. It looks like there's a lot of questions about that tiny URL to go look at the damage inspection. So it's tinyurl.com/Y3JMZXNJ. And then just a reminder that that is in one of the slides on the slideshow. So if you did not get it when I read it that time, it is during the slideshow. We're going to go to questions from the media. I'll go by function. Does anybody have any questions for Operations Section Chief? Seeing and hearing none. Anybody have any questions for Sheriff Honey? Seeing and hearing none. Anybody have any questions for our meteorologist? Seeing and hearing none. How about our fire behavior analyst? Don't see any. And then last but not least, our incident commander. Anybody have any questions for our incident commander? All right, so as we talk about, right behind me are all the numbers and addresses to go find any information that you're interested in about the fires. I always throw out the fire.ca.gov. It has a map on that website. If you go to the map, it has little tiny flames anywhere there's a fire. Remember I said there's 25 fires right now? If you click on that flame, it will take you to that fire and tell you all the information for that fire. And then as we talked about every single night, just a reminder to prepare your family, your home, and your friends for the event of a wildfire. We encourage people to go to readyforwildfire.org, and under that website is our Ready, Set, Go program. Other than that, we'll see you back here tomorrow at 6:01. Thanks for tuning in. Oh yeah, thank you. Immediately following this, there will be a Spanish language version of this press conference. So stick around 10 minutes or so, that'll start. Thank you very much.